Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about House of the Dragon episode 4. We are continuing our rewatch of the season before season 2 drops. Then maybe a little Xmen. Okay, let's dive in. First thing I noticed was how at the beginning of the episode, it feels like the episode of reconciliation, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like a kind of time heals all wounds type
Daemon,
thing.
Viserys, Rhaenyra,
yes,
Alicent. Yeah.
Exactly. Daemon comes back. You know, he's finally gotten Viserys' little seal of approval. You know, he's proved himself. And then, you know, you got Alicent and Rhaenyra. They have their little moment. This irritated me. I really feel bad for Alicent. When she made the comment about like taking him on a tour to see like the tapestries,
and Viserys kind of made a joke about it,
and he laughed at her, and they both laughed. It's just like it's a small thing. However, I think it shows something about the dynamic between Viserys and Alicent that also comes up later in this episode. I think Viserys appreciates Alicent. I don't think he cares.
I mean, I would probably push it and say cares, not loves.
Yeah, it's just like a little insight. I don't know. It's just, it's your I don't know what the right word is right there for like what he's doing there, like minimizing her or like.
It's a little belittling.
Yeah, belittling. That's what I was thinking of. It's just like, you just didn't have to do it. You know, it's a little thing, but I think it's a big thing when you're in her position.
Yeah.
And then you had Rhaenyra sort of like, you know, extend an olive branch kind of like, you know, I want to see them to sort of validate Alicent in that moment, which I was like, this is a nice moment before everything goes to shit.
It's almost like they kind of became a little machismo bros when they're kind of in that moment together, like they're reminiscing about what they used to do. There's a lot of hints dropped about their childhood, like they was outside. You know, they was in the streets, and it does kind of show the hypocrisy that Viserys has kind of accepted about society. Because Daemon's like, we used to do the same thing, and you seem to be okay with this idea of what Rhaenyra's doing. And I'm going to be clear what I'm saying this. What Daemon did was on some predatory vibes for sure. But I do think the lesson that he was saying, it lands strongly when you're juxtaposing it to how Alicent is being taught about her own desires and her own pleasures. She's not getting any of that from the marriage that she has with Viserys. But Rhaenyra is being taught from this age onward that like this can be something that I can enjoy just as a man does, and it can be something that I can not just give something but can receive something also. I found that interesting when Daemon was like, who cares what everyone thinks, like your word is truth and law because you're the king. Viserys is angry at that, but later on that's kind of exactly what he does with Rhaenyra's kids. Everyone knows them white boys are not Velaryon, but he recognizes, in order to protect my daughter, in order to keep things the way that we sort of set up, who's going to challenge that really? So I found that very interesting how Viserys was able to not really take Daemon's advice, but almost like there's some hypocrisy there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of hypocrisy with Viserys' character. I gotta say, on this rewatch, I like him a lot less.
Really?
I don't dislike him. I still see the good qualities in him, but I respect him a lot less on this rewatch than I did the first time around. I definitely think that Viserys has a lot of hypocrisy. One of the things that I was thinking about was how he's very willing to like overlook tradition in some instances and not in others, especially when it comes to Rhaenyra. Like, you know, he's willing to name her heir when he knows like that's not necessarily the traditional way to do things. He's more than willing to, like you said, you know, protect her children and lie for her. But then there's other times where you see like a man in power is still a man in power. And I think that shows up a lot in the way that he treats Alicent. He seems very open-minded in some of the ways that he deals with Rhaenyra. But then when it comes to Alicent, you see in this episode, he's still willing to assert his power and dominance in that relationship, regardless of what she wants, right? Like when he summons her that night,
late,
you looking at her face, nigga, you know she does not want to be there.
Yeah, she's looking away.
And you're pushing her face back to look at you, you know, like it's like he's still just a man in a patriarchal society that has a whole lot of power, and he's only willing to use that power to sort of try to move things forward in certain instances. And I think that's honestly another thing that bothers Alicent. She's not being looked out for and protected when other people are.
What's also interesting now that you sort of bring this up, now granted, I do think that the dynamics are a little bit different because Alicent is his wife and Rhaenyra is his daughter, but Rhaenyra really isn't around to take care of Viserys, like at all. And I remember later on in that season when Rhaenyra comes back and she's kind of questioning the medical decisions that Alicent does with like milk of the poppy, and he's always drinking that tea. Alicent says like, Rhaenyra, if you would have seen what he looks like without it, like he is constantly in miserable pain. And it just kind of shows that like, I don't know, Rhaenyra, like you're claiming like to really love your father, which I think everyone would agree, but like Alicent's the one that was there all of those years to take care of him. And I find that interesting. She doesn't come to accept and respect what Alicent did until like several episodes later when she gives the toast in episode 8. I just found that strange. It was like, Rhaenyra, you're kind of out here doing your thing. And then when things started to get hot, when you started to have more kids with Sir Harwin, you left. You went to Dragonstone because you and Rhaenyra thought things were getting a little bit too tense here. What did you think was going to happen? Did you not think they were going to try not to take more power for themselves while you were gone? I guess I'm just trying to think, like, I still am rooting for Rhaenyra, but I'm like, damn girl, like you were not making great leadership decisions even from earlier on.
I think the truth is Rhaenyra's a little selfish. Honestly.
Well, I have something to say on her about that too. Yeah,
I think that's just the truth, and part of that is she's a child, but also as you're saying, even as she grows up, we sort of see that show up. I think we need to be a little bit honest. I honestly think that Rhaenyra's just kind of selfish. I think she's just willing to do what she wants for herself.
Yes.
Regardless of the impact on other people. Now you can say what you want about that. Some people might look at that and be like, woman empowerment, like she's like, I'm gonna do me no matter what people, you know, and I see that angle. I do. And also, I still think it's true that you could probably say, like, I think she is just kind of selfish about certain things. And it just is what it is. It's just a part of her character. And I think we can name that.
I do find it interesting how HBO has sort of told Rhaenyra's story, because I see a lot of fans sort of mistake her as like a symbol for like feminism or like women empowerment. And I can see to an extent where she's saying, regardless of what this patriarchal system is, like, I want to do the things that pleasure me and make me happy. But I do feel like there is a level of people trying to associate her with Daenerys. And I don't think those two characters are the same at all, even in the slightest bit, especially when they go down to, they're in Flea Bottom and King's Landing, and Rhaenyra and Daemon see that play. She starts booing the people when they start saying that they don't want Rhaenyra as the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. And then Daemon's like, just all you want, but it kind of does matter what the small folks say. And she says, their needs and wants are of little consequence to me. That is the complete opposite of how Daenerys would see the world. Like everything that we had seen her doing literally for her entire arc was breaking the wheel, like breaking societal structures and norms and systems that were oppressive to certain groups. You saw what she did with Missandei, you saw what she did with Grey Worm, you saw what she did with the Unsullied and the Second Sons and all of that. That's not really what Rhaenyra's doing. She's just like, I don't care that much about the systems at work. I just want to be able to do what I want within the systems at work. And I think that's the difference.
Yes. And I am so glad that you said that, because even when she's having that conversation with her dad at the end and she's like, if I was a man, like this wouldn't matter. You're correct. I agree, Rhaenyra, that is true and that is unjust. But you don't care that it's unjust at large. You care that it's impacting you.
Right.
Because when Alicent was forced to marry your father, you ain't have shit to say about the system. You were just mad at her.
It's true. It's true.
You didn't have all of this, you know, this is unjust to you didn't have none of that energy. You were just mad and pouty about how it impacted you. And again, you're a child. You're a child. And I'm trying to keep that in mind. But it's hard also to not also remember that Alicent is also a child.
Yeah, it's true. But I think just some other examples. She does this to protect herself, really, with setting a marriage pact between her sons and Daemon's 2 daughters with Lena. But there was a situation where she could, if she had not gotten herself into all this trouble, she could have named Bela and Rhaenyra as the heir to Driftmark if she was really about that feminist action. But she gets herself in all this trouble, and that thought isn't even like really crossing her mind. Now, granted, maybe she would have if she had more options, maybe, but I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, I think honestly she's just really concerned about herself and her kids, and that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. I just think like we should just be honest about that when we talk about her. That's my only thing. I don't even if you don't think it's like a huge character flaw, fine. But I think we should just be truthful.
Yeah,
just be truthful.
And again, I'll be honest. I'm still Team Black. I'm still rooting for Rhaenyra, but like you said, we got to be honest. She's not Daenerys. Rhaenyra is not Daenerys. And I feel like sometimes we as Team Black, we're putting her on a pedestal where I don't think she belongs.
I have to say, I think I am Team Black mostly because I don't think Aegon should be king. However, if Alicent, if it was Alicent versus Rhaenyra, like if Alicent was like trying to put herself on the throne, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'll say it right here on camera and being recorded. I would root for Alicent over Rhaenyra. I'm telling y'all right now.
TV Alicent, I'll say that.
Yes, TV Alicent. I haven't read the book, so don't come for me. I would just say that the only reason why I am Team Black is because I don't like Aegon, and I don't believe that Aegon should be king. I don't think that would be good. I think that would be very, very bad. And I do think that Rhaenyra has the claim to the throne. But I kind of bangs with Alicent more than I kind of bangs with Alicent more than I bang with Rhaenyra. That's fair. Lie. But again, TV Alicent, don't come in the comments trying to talk about. I just don't care about the books.
She hasn't read the books, yeah, and I don't think she cares about the books to make that.
Don't come in the comments. I don't care. I did pick up on something about Rhaenyra this time watching that I don't think I picked up last time, which was I don't think I really clocked how much what happened to her mom was impacting her view of marriage in her future.
Yeah.
Like, I do think there is a part of this just like, I just kind of want to be young, wild, and free. I think that there is a piece of it that is that. But I also think that there is genuine fear and trauma after what happened to her mom. Like when she's talking to Daemon and she says, my mom was, she was forced to give birth to heirs until it killed her. Mm-hmm. And like that was her life and her legacy, basically. I think that that's really impacting her, and I think that a lot of her action this episode is running away from that. Yeah. Like she's just running clear in the opposite direction. I do think like that is present. That's definitely impacting a lot of what she's doing, in addition to I think just her natural like tendency and just her personality to sort of like kind of just do what she wants to do. I was just really thinking about this episode, the juxtaposition between Rhaenyra's loss of innocence in this episode and Alicent's loss of innocence in this episode. Now, I wholeheartedly agree that Daemon was on some real predatory grooming shit. You know, he was like, I'm going to take her out on the town. I'm going to expose her to all of these things that she's never seen before, that I know she thinks are fascinating and exciting. I'm going to get her into like this unfamiliar space that I know is going to like be titillating and all this stuff. And then I'm going to take advantage of that. I think that she was a victim in this episode. And I think a lot of you sick people who are rooting for Daemon and Rhaenyra are not being truthful. And yes, I said sick. You guys are sick in the head. You are sick. I've seen the edits. I've seen the threads. It's disgusting, and you all should stop.
We need to be honest about Daemon and Rhaenyra's relationship. I don't think we're supposed to root for them in the shipping kind of way that I've seen a lot of people online do. And I don't think George R. R. Martin wanted us to do that either. Because Alicent says in this episode, like, you Targaryens have your weird customs. Which, to me, if I was someone that only read the TV shows, you would think that maybe that's just something that Alicent and maybe the High Towers sort of view the Targaryen customs, because they're a little bit more religiously conservative than other people. But book readers know, y'all know, when Aegon came to Westeros, they were not banging with these Targaryen customs, particularly like siblings and uncles and nieces, that dynamics, they were not banging with that custom at all. But the reality is the Targaryens had dragons, and there was nothing Westeros could do. Even in their world, they are not okay with that, but they just have no power against the Targaryen dynasties because they have dragons. I don't think you're supposed to root for this as a fan in that particular way, and I don't think George R. Martin wanted you to do that. And I actually think he actually came out in an interview not too long ago saying, no, these relationships are not a good thing.
He should not have to come out and say
but
that.
But I see people say, like, not a lot, but I have seen some people say like the values and customs in Westeros are different than they are in our world. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly, because there are people in the shows that are critiquing these things.
When Cersei and Jaime Lannister were on their bullshit, they literally kept it a secret.
Yeah.
Like, nobody was okay with that.
Even with the age gap, they were not okay with any of that. Like, when Tywin is trying to tell Tyrion to marry Sansa and have a child, he keeps saying she's a child. The values are not as separated as I've seen other people try to do to produce a sort of escapism shit between these two characters.
No.
We're not supposed to do that. Also, it's very weird because he's an older guy, and I do feel like that has been sensationalized a little bit in Hollywood.
Yes, it has.
You know what I mean? Like the high school girl and the teacher and the guy, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Pretty Little Liars, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, and I'm like, listen, we got to be honest about how we've kind of normalized some of that behavior, and it's a little weird.
Yeah, I was going to say, honestly, even if you are for some reason okay with overlooking the fact that they're related, which, my God, like, what the fuck? I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I just will never be able to do that. And I don't care what fictional world I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm just never going to be able to overlook that. But even if you are able to overlook that, it's very clear to me that this is a predatory relationship. With all of that being said, my belief that this is bad and he was being predatory. From Rhaenyra's perspective, this experience is exciting. Mm-hmm. It's spontaneous, adventurous. It's, sensual. She's getting introduced to all of this in a way that, from her perspective in the moment, is positive. And then you juxtapose that with Alicent's experience and her loss of innocence and how it was forced upon her. There was nothing spontaneous, adventurous. There was no agency and autonomy. It was the exact opposite in every single way. Every episode, I'm like, we can't act like we don't understand her. I will say, is her anger misdirected? Yes, it is 100%. It is 100% misdirected. And also, I understand it. I understand why it is there. Like, there is a lot to resent. I was robbed of everything that you're getting. And I think what also kind of adds insult to injury is that Rhaenyra is constantly talking about her loss of freedom, her lack of freedom.
Right.
And I think that this is such a good example that, like, what freedom is to you is so relative. Because I don't think Rhaenyra is wrong. I do think that there are a lot of ways that she is being, they're really trying, at least, to sort of like push her in a direction, put her into a box. I think that's definitely happening to her. And yet still, the box that she's being forced into is so much larger, with so much more wiggle room than the box that Alicent is in. Mm-hmm. So I think that just adds to it. It's like Rhaenyra's constantly talking about being forced to do this and this, when she's out there with Daemon, she says something like, who knows the next time I'm going to taste freedom. And she's saying that while we're watching Alicent in the house with her old ass dad on top of her. Like, I don't know.
Or even just other examples. Alicent did not get to choose her spouse.
Yes, I was going to say that too.
And Rhaenyra sees it as a lack of freedom that she gets to choose by hundreds of different men across the realm.
Being forced to choose.
Yeah.
Finds it so much of an issue that she ends the tour and refuses to do it.
Yo, what's that meme from White Lotus? So what? You fuck your uncle? that's literally them. Like, it's just weird. I'm sorry.
I don't know. It's also you honestly think too about just like the mundanity and like how boring Alicent's life is too.
Yeah.
She's alone.
Mm-hmm.
She is alone. She is lonely. She talks to Rhaenyra in this episode and essentially says that she doesn't have friends.
Nope.
She doesn't have friends because people don't know how to befriend her now that she is the queen.
Yeah, she has no identity anymore.
It wasn't just the fact that her ability to choose a romantic partner and what her romantic life would look like was taken from her. Her ability to have any sort of meaningful social life outside of Viserys and her kids was also taken from her. Mm-hmm. She is completely isolated in this scenario. And what makes matters worse is that while Viserys is her only real opportunity for connection, that relationship is entirely her giving, and receiving nothing in return. She gets none of the adoration that Rhaenyra gets from Viserys. She gets none of the gentleness and the care that Viserys gives to Rhaenyra. Yep. She gets none of that from him.
I'm going to acknowledge that typically in power dynamics, it is usually a man doing that over a woman. I understand that wholeheartedly, that this is a very imbalanced experience that tends to victimize women and harm them in a lot of ways. I do think it is important to acknowledge that power dynamics are not gender exclusive. And I think we were not having honest conversations about the power dynamics that Rhaenyra may have had over Criston Cole in that moment. Now, yes, he is a grown-ass man. I understand. He's a grown man. No one is disputing that. But rewatching that scene, bro, there's a lot of things that I think the writers were intentional about leaving in. I'm going to list a few things that I noticed about Criston Cole, what he says and his body language. When they first walk in, she has his helmet and he tries to take it back from her so that he can leave, right? The second thing, when he starts to notice what she's trying to do, he says, "Don't stop," right? Those are the words that he says. Then it's also important to note that she is the one initiating everything and she's not really paying attention to his body language at all, which is a very important thing that we all know is a relevant, important topic of discussion when you're talking about two people engaging with each other. Right. So there's all of that. And then when they're getting undressed, she takes off his white cloak, which I think is a little bit of symbolic about how she views the virtue of him as an individual, but also the virtue of the oath that they took upon themselves as being a Kingsguard. And then he takes it away from her. And then he places it on the table and there's a very long pause. The camera stays at that moment because you can see that something as his honor that he's been trying to hold on to, he's questioning all of that in that moment. I think there's a lot that you can say that happens there. There's a lot that you can say that maybe there's a part of him that was attracted to Rhaenyra that enjoys a lot of these things happening. But we can also admit she was a princess and he was beneath her in authority. That is, you cannot dispute that. Now, does he become a trash person? Yes. Do I like Criston Cole? No, I hate Criston Cole. I want nothing to do with it. What he ends up doing, even later on in the story, the people who I'm talking about, like, I don't bang with Criston Cole. But I think in that specific moment, I think we were letting everything that Criston Cole becomes and is going to be in the story impact how we saw a very human moment. And I see that also with how people see Alicent. When she's younger, we are interpreting everything and I'm doing a lot of implications about what we think she is because of who she's going to become later on, but we're not there yet in the story. And so I just want to say that, like, I think we were a little bit unfair with the discord surrounding Criston Cole, in specifically just in that moment. Everything else, that's fair game to me, but right there, I think we needed a little bit more nuance.
I do remember noticing it the first time I watched it too, but then the discourse online just wasn't reflecting it, so I was like,
you just didn't say anything.
Let me just be quiet. It's like, let me just be quiet. I don't know, but I agree with all of that, and I also, like, number one, like, she's his boss. Like, she's his boss. Like, yeah. Okay. But also, two, they made sure to tell us he does not come from nobility.
Yeah.
He's a regular ass nigga. He's just a regular ass dude who has been given this opportunity, which I think also makes a huge difference. He doesn't have shit to fall back on if this shit goes left. He has nothing. He's not like some of these other knights that have these big grand families and these estates and all of this. He doesn't have any of that. So I also think that that's also relevant here too. There's probably a lot that he's thinking about and weighing in his mind about the consequences of this and how it could play out. I also think I believe that on a level Rhaenyra knew what she was doing. I think that she was using this as like proxy revenge at Daemon. I feel like when Daemon left her, I think there is a part of her that understood what had just happened to her, that she had just been victimized in a sense, right? Like I think she kind of saw like how he was playing games with her that whole night. And then because of that, she then goes and does the same thing. Like even the way that it starts, like the chasing and the playing and stuff, is the same thing that Daemon kind of had doing with her, like to sort of like, you know, I think she was mimicking a lot of that because she felt used and she was trying to regain control of the situation. And so like I can empathize with that. I understand. And also like it's bad. Cycle of abuse, right? Like we understand it, but it's bad. It's still horrible. I think now I don't believe that Criston becomes an incel. I no longer am interpreting it that way. Let me just finish my thought. Now maybe when I see the episode I'll change my mind. Okay, I haven't rewatched that episode again, so maybe I'll change my mind. But how I'm thinking about it right now is you put me in, from his perspective, right? You, Rhaenyra, put me in a compromising position where I did not have very many options. Regardless of like my personal feelings for you, this is not something I would have done. You put me in this position where I did not necessarily feel that I had the choice to say no, and you made me compromise a part of myself that mattered to me a lot. And that also had offered me stability in life. And I think when he comes back to her with that proposal later on to, you know, run away together, that is like the only way that he feels he can make it so that he can live with what happened.
Reconcile what he's experienced.
Like that's it. Like that's the only way he can fathom this working, and him not having to feel so much shame over what they did. And she basically says, no, I just want you to be my side piece. From his perspective, like that's crazy. But it
has been like 10 years later and he's still holding on to that. You know what I mean?
Agreed. That is fair. But when I think of incel, I think of somebody that's like, I feel like
you have a hatred for all women.
And that you feel like you have like an unearned...
Entitled to.
Yes, that's the word.
Yeah.
I feel like I am entitled to this, and I don't think it was an issue of entitlement for him. I think he felt so much shame over what happened to him, which is a very common emotion that people feel after sexual assault. He felt so much shame over what happened to him that he was trying to reconcile with what can I do to relieve this burden? And when he did, he basically got told, like, you're not really shit to me.
You're my hoe.
That, to me, is wild. And I think that's different than being an incel. I think that's different.
I will say the loyalty that he has for Alicent is partly because she does not put him in situations where he has to go through anything similar to that. You see that they have a very strong bond when they're looking for Aegon in episode 9. And like you even see like, is there some feelings there when she says everything that you feel for me as your queen? You could argue there's probably some similar emotions that he probably had with Rhaenyra, but the loyalty for him is probably even stronger because he knows she's never going to ask him to do anything that Rhaenyra asked of him to do, which I think was pretty interesting.
That's a good point.
All right, I have some stuff on Xmen.
Yeah, I have a couple things too.
We have got to stop this binge episode format for television. It is destroying TV. Oh my gosh. And I do kind of feel like the Netflix sort of streaming model, it's a failed experiment because you're seeing all of these other hints of like versions of cable kind of coming back. Like even Bob Iger sort of alluded to, like Disney Plus might come out with their own like channel system where they replay and re-show movies and Disney Plus originals. So cable, you know what I mean?
Do we already have Disney Channel?
Disney Channel. That's what you're describing.
I'm losing my mind. There's no way he said that.
No, this is real. Whatever algorithms that they use, if they are not getting immediate viewing results, the chances of that TV show being canceled skyrockets. And I just want to think about for a second, there are a lot of TV shows that we now see as iconic that when they first dropped that first season, they were not getting crazy viewership numbers. The Wire, Breaking Bad, The Office. The shows like this were not getting crazy views, and a lot of them had talks of them getting canceled after that first season. Think about how culturally relevant those three shows just alone that I mentioned had on pop culture and society. And imagine if we didn't have those right now. I brought this up because I'm thinking about like the longevity of conversations that a TV show like The Last of Us or Xmen 97 or House of the Dragon had on just social media in general. It just serves as a very unintentional, like an unofficial promoting tool for the network, because that word of mouth is still one of the best ways to get someone onto a new TV show. And I just kind of compare that to like Fallout and how I felt like that was such like a great TV show, but now like no one's talking about it anymore. After those first couple of days when everyone's binging through it, no one talks about the show anymore.
The only thing that sometimes bothers me about X-Men and the allegories that they make is that part of it falls a little bit short because like
they are dangerous.
Yeah, like a superhuman is a superhuman. Yeah. You know, like now the thing that doesn't make sense is why are you guys cool with the Avengers? Like that's weird.
Well, that's where the allegory gets stronger when they're both at play.
Yeah, like that does help, I will say.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say, something that these superhero movies do a lot when they try to make these points, the thing that makes Magneto or Killmonger or Namor like not 100% correct is that like they're not selective.
Yeah.
And I feel like these big companies that want to like play with social justice and play with these themes but not commit to them, they do that because they need you to side with the non-violent heroes. Like they need you to go back to T'Challa. They need you to go back to Professor X as right in the end because they present it as like these are your two options.
Right.
You got this guy over here who wants to just go full on, just take them all out. We don't care. I'm taking over the world. Like, yes, you empathize with why he wants to do it. The injustice is real, but this is da-da-da-da. And then you have these people over here that are just completely nonviolent. They want world peace. And to me, I feel like that's how a lot of white America thinks these issues are. Like that's their worst fear. Like they are afraid that the alternative to what they're doing and the alternative to like sort of this complacency is a complete cultural world takeover by these oppressed groups, and suddenly we're going to be the oppressed ones, and like that's not true. And if you were to have an actual honest representation of a person who is a radical leftist in their beliefs from a perspective of somebody like a Magneto or a Killmonger, it is not common, or it is not the dominant belief in like the writings and like the words of many of these people that the alternative to our oppression is their oppression.
Yeah.
Rarely is that the case. Usually it's liberation for all, but you don't see that perspective represented in these films. The reason why that character is the antagonist is because of how far they're taking the ideas.
Yeah.
They don't want to include an honest representation of what these ideas actually are, which is all of these things that Magneto, that Killmonger, that Namor are saying are true. And this is how they actually look in the world, which is like, we want freedom for everybody.
Which honestly makes this portrayal of Magneto a lot more accurate to how like real like radicalists and revolutionaries look in the real world.
Yes, this is the first time I'm really seeing Magneto portrayed like this. What I'm used to seeing is like, it's very understandable. Like you understand why he's so angry. But what I'm used to seeing in the films is that because he's so hurt and angry, he just goes wild. And he's just like, we're just going to kill everybody. We're going to take over the government. We're just going to do it all. And like, that's honestly not usually how these radical ideas look. Like even with the Black Panthers, like, you know, they get a lot of heat for how people talk about them. But like, a lot of their work and effort was around like building community, mutual aid, community care. Like that's honestly what a lot of these radical ideas, how they look in practice is like, so we have a huge issue with the way that the power system is set up, and the response to that is we take care of each other.
Yep.
So I always find that interesting. I think that they purposely dumb down and take out the nuance of these ideas because they know that they can't make them too rational.
Yeah.
They have to make some irrationality to it so that they can fall back on the position that is the most safe. I just wanted to say that the finale of Shogun was, I think, the best finale that I've seen in a long time.
A long time.
And I don't have a whole lot to say since we haven't really been unpacking the show like that, but I think I've realized a good finale is not the climactic moment. It's not the big action-packed battle scene. It is the repercussions. It is dealing with the repercussions of it and the reflection. And I think that's what made this episode so good. There really wasn't any huge action. I honestly thought there was going to be. I thought we were going to see him charge,
the big battle.
all of that. And instead they left that to our imagination and they just let us sit with the what did everybody give up and lose to get to this point in the story.
Yeah.
And I just think that is just, I just think that's masterclass.
Mm-hmm.
Just absolutely masterclass writing. I think that's phenomenal because that's the meat of the story.
Yeah. And you felt the weight of all of the decisions.
Yes,
all the characters made that led up to this moment.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Well, with that, we want to thank you all again so much for tuning in. We will see you all next time, everyone. Take care. Peace.